股市简报，全世界证券交易员、投资家的专业媒体。股市简报内容来自全球专业媒体，由六度简报团队制作。六度简报的网址是6dobrief.com。随着外国投资者的撤离，中国科技集团遭受重创。金融时报，近期中国在线娱乐平台哔哩哔哩的市值暴跌至约65亿美元，2年前曾达到540亿美元。这种市值崩溃迫使该公司提前偿还债务，威胁到其剩余资金，导致公司采取大规模的成本削减措施。哔哩哔哩的困境反映了中国科技行业的普遍问题。即使是像腾讯和阿里巴巴这样的盈利互联网巨头，也受到海外投资者的减持压力。这些投资者也不愿意支持中国最有潜力的初创企业。由于不稳定的经济复苏，中国科技股票的下跌趋势让员工和投资者担心，纽约和香港上市的中国科技集团的低估值可能是长期存在的。自新冠疫情爆发以来，中国10大科技集团的市值共计缩水了3000亿美元，而他们在美国的同行则增加了近5万亿美元。不断升级的中美紧张关系让许多投资者想起了曾经支持俄罗斯企业的命运。伴随着俄罗斯总统普京下令对乌克兰进行全面入侵，西方国家实施了严厉的制裁，企业价值数十亿美元迅速蒸发。华盛顿对美国对中国投资的限制计划增加了复杂性，这将进一步加强旨在限制北京获得先进半导体和芯片制造设备等关键技术的出口管制。大型外国投资者也因此开始退缩，包括西方养老金基金，他们在私募和公募市场上一直是中国科技的主要支持者。目前有252家在美国或香港上市的中国公司符合净净的定义，即当前资产减去总负债大于市值。根据标普资本智慧数据，这个群体包括深度低迷的股票，如腾讯支持的斗鱼，这是一家盈利的视频游戏直播平台，净现金达 8.8 亿美元，市值仅为 3.23 亿美元。中国科技公司正在优先进行股票回购和精简业务。一位中国科技投资者和几家领先公司的董事表示，考虑到股价如此低，这样的策略是明智的。他希望这将有助于提振股价，使他的公司能够出售长期持有的股份。对于像哔哩哔哩这样规模较小且未盈利的公司来说，低估值问题尤为严重。在努力实现盈亏平衡的同时，员工表示管理层已经削减了奖金和裁员，并缩减了业务范围。该公司股价的暴跌使挑战变得更加严峻。借出29亿美元的投资者现在可以选择提前回收可转债，公司将在6月中旬花费17亿美元回购这些可转债，使其现金储备缩水至约20亿美元。明年，哔哩哔哩面临着另外9亿美元的债务偿还压力，这对于其巨额亏损来说可能是一个潜在问题。中国预计5月份工业产出增长率为 5.2%， 较4月份的 5.6% 有所下降。南华早报，市场普遍共识表明，中国经济增长势头放缓，预计5月份工业产出增长率为 5.2%， 较4月份的 5.6% 有所下降。有关报告将于6月15日发布。美国银行预测零售销售额可能增长 14%， 而4月份的增长率为 18.4%。中国的出口在5月份大幅低于市场共识预测，而进口基本持平，导致贸易顺差较4月份的900亿美元缩小到658亿美元。根据上周的官方数据显示，与此同时，零售投资者购买香港股票，市场看涨派正面临美联储的考验。根据 CME Group 编制的数据，美联储基金期货合约显示，美联储在6月14日举行的决策者会议上将有 76% 的概率将其关键利率维持在 5% 至 5.25% 的区间内，这一概率较上周五的 70% 有所增加。自2022年3月起，美联储已在10次会议中从接近零的利率上调。中国打印机制造商 9star 和新疆中泰化工因被美国政府指控存在人权侵犯问题而被列入实体清单，无法进入美国供应链。两家公司的股价分别下跌了 6% 至 8%。周一有2只股票首次上市。在香港， Katia Therapeutics 的股价下跌 1.6% 至 21.50 港元，而在深圳，福建南网环境的股价上涨 21% 至 21.35元。 亚洲主要市场表现不一，日本的日经225指数上涨 0.7%， 澳大利亚的 S&P ASX 200指数上涨 0.3%， 而韩国的 KOSPI 指数下跌 0.4%。HKDRMB 双重交易模式是一个新的计划，旨在让内地投资者直接交易股票。南华早报 HKDRMB 双重交易模式是一个新的计划，旨在让内地投资者能够直接使用人民币在香港股票市场上交易股票，而不再需要进行汇率转换带来的风险。根据这个计划，企业可以向香港交易所 HKEX 申请在他们的香港原柜台之外开设一个人民币柜台，并且已经有24家企业的人民币柜台申请得到了 HKEX 的批准，还有更多的企业申请正在等待审批。这个计划将吸引内地和国际投资者来香港交易股票，特别是那些持有离岸人民币的投资者，因为他们将有一个新的机会进行更多元化的投资组合管理，并获得更好的回报。这个计划对于香港的资本市场有重要的影响，它将增加股票交易的流动性，吸引更多的内地和国际投资者参与香港股市，并提升香港作为国际金融中心和人民币业务中心的地位。这也是人民币国际化的重要一步，有助于扩大人民币在不同产品和投资者群体中的应用，并为人民币的国际化奠定基础。尽管可能存在人民币柜台股票和港元柜台股票之间的价格差异，但市场做市商和投资者的活动将有助于减小这一差距。同时，这个计划还可能导致 A 股和 H 股之间的溢价收敛，因为内地投资者参与这个双重交易模式可以避免外汇风险。总的来说，这个计划将为香港的资本市场带来好处，吸引更多的投资者和资金流入，同时促进人民币的国际化进程。投资者重新思考经济衰退，助长美国股市落后者。加拿大环球邮报，强劲的就业增长和强劲的消费支出是支持投资者对经济前景乐观的数据之一。在调整经济衰退预测的公司中，高盛最近将未来12个月内经济衰退的概率从 35% 降至 25%， 而 Nuveen 的首席投资官塞拉·马利克最近写道，轻微的经济衰退很可能从2023年末延迟至2024年。在接下来的一周里，投资者将密切关注周二公布的美国消费者物价数据，以判断美联储的加息是否继续抑制通胀而不会对经济增长造成严重损害。美联储将于周三结束为期2天的货币政策会议，虽然大多数市场参与者预计美国央行将保持利率不变，但许多人也将评估政策制定者对未来收紧的意愿。一些市场观察人士认为现在对经济乐观还为时尚早。Capital Economics 的分析师在周四的报告中写道，小盘股的反弹可能还为时尚早，他们预计未来几个月的增长将放缓。周四公布的失业救济申请数高于预期，这表明劳动市场可能正在降温。然而，其他人更乐观。Miramar Capital 的高级投资组合经理马克斯·瓦斯曼一直在增加他在表现不佳的消费股票上的持仓，例如星巴克和塔吉特公司，截至目前年初分别下跌约 1% 和 15%。他预计在下半年经济增长稳定下来时，餐饮和零售业将表现优异。他说，那时候我们认为我们会得到回报。明智地管理您的资金。每周3次将最新的投资见解直接发送到您的收件箱，请订阅 Globe Investor 通讯。立即注册。中国和沙特官员誓言要改善营商环境。南华早报。中国和沙特高级官员承诺营造更好的商业环境，支持双方企业，并利用增长中的经济关系的势头。在星期日上午在沙特阿拉伯首都利雅得举行的第10届中阿商务大会开幕式上，中国政协副主席胡春华表示，中国将继续支持中阿企业深化双向投资机会。胡春华说，我们欢迎阿拉伯企业扩大在中国的投资，我们也将支持实力强劲的中国企业在阿拉伯国家进行投资。他还补充说，中国将与沙特阿拉伯在振兴各自文明方面进行实质进展。我们将加强在生产能力、基础设施、贸易、投资和金融关系方面的合作，以帮助实现沙特阿拉伯经济发展的多元化。他还表示，中国将推动沙特阿拉伯的绿色能源、健康、航空和数字经济等领域的增长。他说， 我们也期待在阿拉伯国家看到更加开放和公平的商业环境，保护投资者的权益。沙特投资部长哈利德·法利赫在星期日的主旨演讲中表示，他希望中阿海合会自由贸易协定的谈判，该谈判始于2004年，但多次陷入停滞，能够很快达成协议。法利赫说，我们已经走了很长一段路，双方的领导层表现出愿意合作的态度。他还表示，该协定将使沙特的产业能够出口，使我们希望所有与我们谈判自由贸易协定的国家都知道，我们需要保护我们的新兴产业。这次大会由超过3000名与会者参加，包括来自中国大陆和香港的商人，背景是中国和沙特阿拉伯在与华盛顿的关系日益恶化的情况下对加强经济联系的增长兴趣。胡春华是这次为期2天的大会中最高级的中国官员，他表示这次活动是一个加强和实施的机会，实施中国主席习近平去年12月在利雅得参加的首届中阿峰会的成果。据悉，这是胡春华自今年3月成为政协副主席以来的首次公开海外访问。中国国际银行行长李彤和中信资本高级经理王方路被邀请作为大会的专题演讲嘉宾。香港商务及经济发展局局长邱腾华和恒隆集团董事长陈启宗也参加了大会。根据沙特的2030年沙特愿景计划，沙特阿拉伯旨在通过鼓励向健康、基础设施、休闲和旅游等新兴行业投资，实现对以石油为主导的经济的多元化。沙特外交部长法萨尔·宾·法赫安在星期日的开幕演讲中表示，我们为我们之间的伙伴关系所取得的成就感到自豪，并且促使我们进一步加强这种关系的是共同的意愿，即通过联系和协调开展更多的业务和伙伴关系。阿拉伯联盟秘书长艾哈迈德·阿布·哈谢提也在星期日发表了主旨演讲。他表示，中国与阿拉伯国家的商业合作增强了区域和全球层面的投资氛围。他还表示，这次大会将就国家面临的全球经济的负面影响以及俄乌冲突危机对不同行业的影响进行重要的讨论。根据沙特政府的官方数据，中国是阿拉伯世界最大的贸易伙伴，2022年的总贸易额达到4300亿美元。单单沙特阿拉伯就占中国与阿拉伯国家总贸易额的 25%。沙特科技公司 Creativity and Technology 的技术销售经理 Nasir Mushtaq 首次参加这次大会。他表示，正在寻找能够提供技术解决方案的中国商业伙伴。Mushtaq 表示，我们一直与欧洲合作伙伴合作，但我们想寻找更具成本效益的解决方案。他说，如果我们与中国的技术公司合作，我们预计成本将降低 30% 到 40%。本次大会由沙特阿拉伯投资部、阿拉伯联盟秘书处、中国国际贸易促进委员会和阿拉伯商会联盟共同组织，讨论的专题包括食品安全合作、全球贸易、供应链、融资和中国的一带一路倡议。日本企业面临更多股东提案。日本时报，在 Cosmo Energy Holdings， 一家旨在分拆公司可再生能源业务的投资基金正在呼吁任命一位外部董事。该公司反对这一要求，将要求股东批准读完防御措施，以防止被收购。代表游戏制造商任天堂创始家族管理资产的公司正在争夺东洋建设的控制权，他们提出了自己的9位董事候选人名单。这是一家从事海洋和土木工程的公司。总承包商熊谷组收到一家投资基金的回购股份提案。文化百叶窗则被一家投资基金要求将全部净利润分配给股东。环保组织和外国机构投资者呼吁丰田汽车和主要银行等公司修改其公司章程以减少碳排放。近年来，国内机构投资者在公司不符合盈利和其他标准时，开始反对公司的提案。三井住友 DS 资产管理公司表示，在行使对董事任命的投票权之前，将考虑哪一个提案，来自公司还是股东，将增强公司价值。电梯制造商富士电梯在2月份的股东大会上否决了公司提出的关于外部董事任命的提案，支持了一家活跃股东的提案。富士电梯的董事会于次月解除了创始家族成员内山贵一的董事长职务。内山贵一已经提出了自己的8位外部董事候选人名单，将在本月底的股东大会上进行选举。谢谢大家收看股市简报，这是由6度简报团队为您制作的内容。6度简报的网址是 6dobrief.com， 专门面对全球精英、专业人士。
华尔街简报来自各大权威媒体与机构专业的独特分析。观众朋友，大家好，欢迎收看今天的华尔街简报，我是新峰。路透社独家报道，台湾外长吴钊燮下周将赴欧。4位知情人士说，台湾外长吴钊燮将在下周对欧洲进行一次先前没有宣布的访问，预计将会与捷克总统一起出现在一个活动中，以实现外交上的突破。除了梵蒂冈之外，台湾没有与任何欧洲国家建立正式的外交关系。北京经常谴责台湾官员与西方官员之间任何形式的接触，认为这是在鼓励全球承认台湾的独立地位。2名消息人士说，吴钊燮预计将会访问欧盟总部所在地布鲁塞尔，还有另外2名消息人士说，他也将访问布拉格。计划中，吴钊燮将会出席6月14号在布拉格举行的安全会议，并且将在捷克总统帕维尔宣布会议开幕后立即发表讲话。一位消息人士表示，鉴于欧洲领导人通常不与台湾高级官员同台演讲，这将是非常不寻常的。欧盟的外交事务部门对此回应说，我们无权介入第三国伙伴的访问和活动。在今年1月份，当帕维尔新当选捷克总统时，他与台湾总统蔡英文通了电话，这一事件在当时已经激怒了北京一次。与此同时，路透社还独家报道，台湾宏基在表示暂停业务后，继续向俄罗斯运送计算机硬件。台湾计算机制造商宏基此前表示将暂停在俄罗斯的业务，但是根据路透社看到的海关数据，在2022年4月8号至2023年3月31号期间，他向俄罗斯提供了价值至少7040万美元的电脑硬件。宏基的行为虽然不违法，但是与戴尔和惠普等主要西方竞争对手形成了鲜明对比。戴尔和惠普等计算机制造商在俄罗斯入侵乌克兰之后，分别于2022年2月和4月停止了发货，一直至今。记录显示，宏基生产的设备是通过宏基在瑞士注册的全资子公司提供给俄罗斯的。由于这些货物来自台湾以外的地区，他们没有违反台北对俄罗斯的制裁，他们也不涉及在出口时受到瑞士制裁制度限制的物品。但是在去年4月8号的一份声明中，台湾宏基曾经表示已经决定暂停在俄罗斯的业务。当被问及他通过瑞士子公司向俄罗斯的出口时，台湾宏基辩称该瑞士子公司自去年4月8号以来没有向俄罗斯运送任何笔记本电脑或者台式机，但是他在确保遵守国际制裁的条件下，向俄罗斯市场提供了计算机的显示器和配件。宏基没有正面解释为什么在宣布暂停俄罗斯业务后，继续向俄罗斯运送货物。一位熟悉运输细节的消息人士则说，宏基的产品包括他否认的笔记本电脑，在2022年4月之后仍然继续运往俄罗斯。瑞士的制裁与欧盟的制裁一致，允许向俄罗斯出口笔记本电脑和计算机部件。根据咨询公司 IDC 的数据，在2021年，宏基占俄罗斯电脑市场的 18.5%， 而惠普和戴尔总共占 20.8%。分析人士表示，台湾宏基面临着声誉受损的风险。俄罗斯海关数据显示，2022年4月8日至2023年3月31日期间，至少有744批宏基的产品进入了俄罗斯，而战争前的同期为3735批。台湾去年宣布于2022年2月25日加入对俄罗斯的制裁，对政府清单上的技术商品需要有特别的出口许可。台湾经济部表示，包括显示器、显示屏和笔记本电脑在内的高性能电子产品都被列入该份清单，出口申请原则上不会被批准。台湾经济部表示，截至2023年3月底，宏基没有申请此类许可证，台湾海关也没有宏基向俄罗斯出口的记录。向俄罗斯提供宏基设备的主要供应商是宏基销售国际有限公司，该公司在瑞士南部的比奥吉奥市注册。另外，《华尔街日报》报道，中国在美国商品进口中的份额降至2006年以来的最低水平。4月份，美国从国外进口了更多的商品，并同时减少了对中国产品的依赖。报道指出，这是今年春天美国经济强劲势头的另一个迹象。美国从中国收到的货物运输份额已经降至2006年以来的最低水平。近年来，从亚洲其他国家的进口则有所增加，以满足美国市场对外国产品的需求。美国商务部周三表示， 4月份，美国企业进口了更多的汽车、手机和金属等工业用品，但是原油和天然气的进口减少，因为运输和旅行在内的服务减少了。而中国在对美贸易中的份额再次下滑，继续呈现下降趋势。在截至4月的12个月里，中国占美国商品进口的 15.4%， 是2006年10月以来的最小份额。近年来，美国公司一直在寻找中国制造的替代品。美国经济学家表示，美国正在寻求贸易渠道的多样化，因为双方的关系变得更加敌对。而中国份额的丧失也意味着欧洲国家、墨西哥和其他亚洲国家有了更多的收益，包括印度、日本和越南在内的25个亚洲国家，在截至4月的12个月中占到了美国货物进口的 25%。中国5月份的出口下滑加剧了人们对中国经济复苏的担忧。本周三，中国海关数据表示，5月份的中国出货量比去年同期下降了 7.5%。经合组织周三表示，预计今年全世界的贸易增长将达到 1.6%， 这与2022年录得的 5% 的增长相比放缓明显，反映了高通胀和加息对全球经济活动的影响。路透社报道，中国最高监管机构试图安抚外国金融家。6月8号，一年一度的高规格金融论坛陆家嘴论坛拉开了帷幕。中国最高金融监管机构在论坛上向外国金融家保证，中国对投资是开放的。中国最近热衷于外国投资，今年年初至今已经接待了67名海外企业的高管。但是随着拜登的出口限制和习近平近期对外国咨询公司和尽职调查公司的打击，人们对中国的怀疑情绪有所加深。在陆家嘴论坛上，中国国家金融监管局局长李云泽在他上任后的首次公开讲话中说，我们热烈欢迎经营稳健、资质优良的外资机构在中国拓展业务。他说，对外开放是中国的长期国策，中国金融业的大门只会越开越大。来自汇丰银行、法国农业信贷银行、美林证券、施罗德公司的高级代表也将在论坛上发言。中国的最高金融监管机构一直强调中国市场的开放程度。在会上，中国证监会主席易会满告诉参与者，中国将会坚定地在市场准入、机构资质和产品方面放松管制。但是，一些在华外企的员工和高管表示，对中国的一些承诺已经感到疲劳。加拿大中国工商业委员会的总经理弗雷泽说，关键是中国是否用任何实际的、黑白分明的、有意义的政策变化来支持他们的承诺，似乎是没有看到。以上就是本期华尔街简报的全部内容。更多全球最新资讯可以关注六度简报网站，网址是6度brief.com。在上面大家可以订阅各类符合你喜好的简报新闻，有免费套餐，也有专业定制的付费套餐供大家选择。今天的节目就是这样，感谢您的收看，我们下期节目再见。
Well, good afternoon. Please be seated. I'd like to start with the permission of my British friends to just say a few words about the wildfires in Canada and the quality of the air here in the East Coast. This blanketed the communities in the East Coast and the smoke this past few days. I just put out a more detailed statement, so for the press and for the people to see, but I spoke yesterday with Prime Minister Trudeau, and I've decided dictated a national interagency fire center response to Canada's request for additional firefighters and the fire suppression assets such as air tankers. We already have 600 American firefighters on the ground and been there for a while in Canada, including hotshots and the smoke jumper crews. And it's very important that affected communities listen to the guidance of their state and local officials from this point forward. To keep up to date on the air quality in real time, go to the app that we provided. It's called airnow.gov, and check on one another. And by the way, what you'll get is something that looks like this with a calibrated piece that says when the air is clean and when the air is dangerous and hazardous. and it dictates what to tell you the air quality in the neighborhood. Now, it's my honor to welcome Prime Minister Sunak to the White House. Rishi, you're probably tired of meeting. We met in March in San Diego to discuss AUKUS and with Prime Minister of Australia. In April, we were there for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement in Belfast. We met and discussed again today the need to get the Stormont Institution in Northern Ireland up and running. Last month, together with our G7 partners in Hiroshima, we drove progress in everything from our shared support for the brave people of Ukraine to the common principles of engaging with China. Today in Washington, we have had important and positive discussions to deepen our bilateral economic relationship and expand our cooperation to shape the challenges and future for this remainder of this century. It's a testament to the depth, breadth, and I would argue the intensity of our cooperation and coordination, which continues to exist between the United Kingdom and the United States. There's no issue of global of importance, none, where our nations are not leading together and where we're not sharing our common values to make things better. In our conversations today, we continue to build on all that we've achieved over these past months. We discussed how we can continue to adapt and upgrade our partnership to ensure our countries remain at the cutting edge of a rapidly changing world. Our economic partnership is an enormous strength and source of strength that anchors everything that we do together. We want to harness that power to make sure we're creating good jobs and supporting working-class families in both our countries, and that growth is shared broadly and no one gets left behind. So today, we're releasing a new plan to equip our economic partnership for the 21st century. It outlines how we can enhance our cooperation to accelerate the clean energy transition that must take place and is taking place, lead the development of emerging technologies that are going to shape so much of our future, and protect technologies critical to our national security. And a key piece of that is working together to strengthen our critical mineral supply chains and to make them more resilient so we're not dependent on any one country to meet our goals. When it comes to technology that will shape the future, like semiconductors, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, the UK and the US are working together to make sure they are developed safely and responsibly and jointly. We're going to do more on joint research and development to ensure the future we're building remains fundamentally aligned with our value set in both our countries. And we're doing more to prevent technologies that are invented and developed in our countries from being used for military or intelligence purposes by countries that do not share our values. Today, we'll also discuss our unwavering support for the people of Ukraine and who are defending themselves against the most brutal aggression we've seen in a long time at the hands of Russia and Putin. The UK and the United States, together with more than 50 partners, have committed historic levels of security assistance to Ukraine. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for his strong leadership, contributing significant amounts of security assistance and training Ukrainian troops so they can effectively use the equipment and ammunition we've collectively provided them. And in bringing the world together later this month to drive support for Ukraine's long-term economic recovery. You're doing a great deal. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for making the journey to Washington. Earlier this week, we marked the 79th anniversary of D-Day, and a timely reminder of the proud history of our nation's share and the values that we have long stood together to defend. That's the unshakable foundation of this special relationship, and it is a special relationship. There's no country closer to us than Great Britain. Today, as NATO allies, partners in innovation, as friends in a shared vision of the future, and our two nations are ready to meet the challenges of our time and meet them together. And I'm confident the United Kingdom and the United States will continue to lead the world toward greater peace, prosperity, and security for all. So thank you again, Mr. Prime Minister, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I begin my remarks, a word, if I may, on what happened in France this morning. All our thoughts are with those affected by this unfathomable attack, including a British child, and with their families. I've been in touch with President Macron. We stand ready to offer any assistance that we can. Mr. President, Joe, it is an honor to be here at the White House, and thank you for your very warm welcome. Not for decades has the relationship between our two nations been so important. The values we share, our belief in freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, have never changed. They never will. But what has changed are the challenges that we face. And standing here together, as our predecessors have done for generations, I feel confident that through the strength of our relationship, we can shape the world once again in our pursuit of liberty, prosperity, and the possibilities of a new age. And that begins with our highest priority, national security. Last time I was here in the US, we signed AUKUS, the most significant defense partnership in generations, because we recognize that the security of the Atlantic and Pacific regions are indivisible. And just a fortnight ago, in Hiroshima, President Biden and I stood with President Zelensky and our G7 allies in a powerful display of unity. The UK is proud of our contribution, including providing tanks, long-range weapons, and training Ukrainian soldiers. But let no one doubt, US leadership and resources are the decisive contribution allowing the forces of democracy and freedom to prevail. As I said in Congress, and I say again now to President Biden and to the American people, thank you. And just as we collaborate to protect our national security, so must we increasingly do the same to protect our economic security, on which our prosperity depends. Countries like China and Russia are willing to manipulate and exploit our openness, steal our intellectual property, use technology for authoritarian ends, or withdraw crucial resources like energy. They will not succeed. Today we have agreed the Atlantic Declaration, a new economic partnership for a new age, of a kind that has never been agreed before. Yes, a partnership that protects our citizens, but more than that, a test case for the kind of reimagined alliances President Biden has spoken so eloquently about. That means new investment. This week alone, £14 billion of new American investment has been committed into the UK, creating thousands of jobs. It means stronger supply chains with a new action plan on clean energy. And it means reducing trade barriers in the technologies of the future with a new secure UK-US data bridge, helping tens of thousands of small businesses. An agreement to work towards mutual recognition of more professional qualifications in areas like engineering. And we're launching negotiations on a new critical minerals agreement. Once concluded, this will give UK companies stronger access to the US market. And we're building on our extraordinary shared strengths in cutting-edge future technologies, with joint research collaborations in areas like quantum, semiconductors, and AI. Now, our job as leaders is to ensure that this technological revolution makes us more secure and not less. Last week, the pioneers of artificial intelligence warned us about the scale of the challenge as well as the opportunity. The US and the UK are the world's foremost democratic AI powers. So today, President and I agreed to work together on AI safety, including multilaterally. Now, the UK looks forward to hosting the first global summit on AI safety later this year, so that we can seize the extraordinary possibilities of this new technological age and do so with confidence. And we are well placed to do so. I know some people have wondered what kind of partner Britain would be after we left the EU. I'd say, judge us by our actions. We're committed to our values as ever, as reliable an ally as ever, as attractive an investment destination as ever. But we're changing too. We're strengthening our relationships, not just with old friends like America and in Europe, but with new friends in the Indo-Pacific too. And we now have the freedom to regulate the new technologies that will shape our economic future, like AI, more quickly and flexibly. That is the future that we are creating in Britain, confident, proud, and free. And let me close with a personal reflection. As Joe mentioned, he and I have seen quite a lot of each other in recent months. I gather our wives have even started to take spin classes together. And we were talking earlier about our hometowns. Joe is very rightly proud of Scranton. And I was telling him a little bit about Southampton in England, where I'm from. Now, not everyone knows this, but it was in a church in Southampton where in the days before he set sail for these shores that John Winthrop first spoke about his dream of building a city on a hill. And that reminds us that the relationship between our two nations is unlike any other. Our alliance is so strong because it is not abstract. It is rooted in our people. And it's never been about our history alone, but about our ability to grasp the future. We share the same beliefs, pursue the same purpose, and act according to the same ideals. And that's why today, as we meet the challenges of our time, we can depend on each other with absolute conviction. When the United States and the United Kingdom stand together, the world is a safer, better, and more prosperous place. And that's why ours is the indispensable alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. All right, first question goes to James of the Financial Times, unless he left.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the question. You spoke about your unwavering support for the people of Ukraine. So much of that depends on funding from the US Congress. And now with the counteroffensive underway, when do you expect to return to Congress and ask for new funding? And how much do you expect you will need? And do you think that Speaker McCarthy will agree to it, given some skeptical comments that we heard earlier this week?
No, not sure, and yes.
And to Prime Minister Sunak, you spoke earlier this week about the importance of finding long-term security arrangements and agreements for the defense of Ukraine for many years ahead. Do you think that, have you found a common position with President Biden on that issue? What's your preferred model for a long-term security agreement with respect to Ukraine? And does it need to be sorted out before the Vilnius summit? Thank you.
Let me begin by answering your question. First of all, the Ukrainians should speak to the military operations. I won't do that from here. We've done everything we could collectively, but individually in the United States, to make them ready to support that they're going to continue, and an evolving situation that we're very optimistic. In talks with the Ukrainians, and particularly with Zelensky and our allies and partners on commitments to Ukraine, long-term security to deter future aggression after this war ends is a goal. And we're advancing this goal by providing them the support Ukraine needs now on the battlefield and helping them strengthen their military over the long term. The fact of the matter is that I believe we'll have the funding necessary to support Ukraine as long as it takes. And I believe that that support will be real, even though you hear some voices today on Capitol Hill about whether or not we should continue to support Ukraine and for how long we should support them. The fact of the matter is, I asked people to picture what would happen if we were not supporting Ukraine. Do we think Russia would stop in Kyiv? Do you think that's all there would be happening? I think not, and I think the vast majority of my colleagues, even the critics, think that would not be the case as well. There's much more to say about Ukraine, but I hope that answers your direct question.
James, thank you for the question. If I might actually touch on your first question first and say it's actually entirely reasonable for the American people to hear what I say and hopefully acknowledge the thanks that we have for their support of the situation in Ukraine, but also ask if everyone is doing their bit. And that's why, as I said, the UK is proud to be behind the US, the biggest contributor to the military effort in Ukraine. And I think it's right that other countries also step up and do their part. We're lucky to have America's investment in European security, but we need to share the burden alongside you, which is why defense spending in the UK has been above the 2% NATO benchmark. It's on an increasing trajectory, and we would encourage other countries to follow the lead that the US and the UK set, because our security is collective. I think the other thing for you to know about us as an ally is we also view security as indivisible between the Euro-Atlantic region and the Pacific. That's why the AUKUS partnership is so important. That's why we're strengthening our engagement and alliances in that region too, so that the US can count on the UK as a partner and an ally, sharing the burden, but also working together in every sphere that it matters. And on your latter question, I agree with what the President said. It's about deterrence. President Putin will be thinking that he can wait us out, that the alliance will tire, will get fatigued, and will give up. Now, that is not the case. And the more we can put in place support for Ukraine, not just in the here and now, but support that will last for a time and for years to come, I think it sends a strong signal to him that there is no point trying to wait us out. We're not going anywhere. We will be here for as long as it takes. And hopefully that will speed up the calculation in his mind that he should withdraw his forces and stop what is an illegal and unprovoked act of aggression.
Also, if you don't mind my making an addendum, I'd point out that not only do we have Europe responding, I spent a lot of time in Japan. The Japanese have stepped up. They've stepped up in terms of their budget. They've stepped up in terms of their involvement. They've stepped up in terms of the support for Ukraine, realizing that a glaring invasion with no pretext of anything other than conquering land occurring in the 21st century is a danger not only in Europe but everywhere in the world. The next question from the PBS NewsHour, Laura.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I think you're going to steal the mic. That's why they're
yeah, they're holding on to it. Laura Barone-Lopez with the PBS NewsHour. All over the country, Mr. President, Republican-led states are passing laws, passing anti-LGBTQ, anti-transgender laws that restrict rights in medical care. Intimidation is on the rise. This week, anti-LGBTQ protesters turned violent in California. And also recently, I spoke to the parents of a transgender girl in Texas who told me that they're afraid and that they're considering leaving not just their state, but the country. Sir, why do you think this is happening? And what do you say to parents like the ones that I spoke to those families who are contemplating leaving the country because they don't feel safe anymore? And then Prime Minister Sunak, thank you. You mentioned that AI has been a key part of your visit. What are the US and the UK, what is the UK doing with the US to protect elections and democracy from AI-generated disinformation campaigns waged at scale by foreign actors? And you also mentioned the warning letters sent by AI leaders about the potential threat that this technology, if misused, can pose to humanity. How is regulating artificial intelligence going to be any different than what has been done at the global scale so far to deal with climate change, another existential threat?
Let me answer your first question. First of all, maybe quietly when we finish this, you can give me the number of that family, and I will call them, let them know that the President and this administration has their back, and I mean that. Look, as president, I was proud to end the ban on transgender troops in our military, sign the Respect for Marriage Act, strengthen the civil rights protections for LGBT Americans, and advance LGBT human rights around the globe. But our fight is far, far from over because we have some hysterical and I would argue, prejudice people who are engaged in all what you see going on around the country. It's an appeal to fear, and it's an appeal that is totally, thoroughly unjustified and ugly. It's wrong for that a person can be married in the morning in the United States and fired in the afternoon by their employer because they're gay. It's wrong that the violence and hate crimes targeting LGBTQ people is rising. It's wrong that extreme officials are pushing hateful bills targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors. These are our kids. These are our neighbors. It's cruel and it's callous. Not somebody else's kids, they're all our kids. They're the kids, and our children are the kite strings that hold our national ambitions aloft. It matters a great deal how we treat everyone in this country. And the fact is that I'm announcing today a series of new initiatives that we're taking to protect the LGBT community. I was going to do this at the 4 out on the South Lawn. We're having Pride Day, but we're going to have to postpone it because of the climate, because of the weather and the pollution out there, because of the fires. But number one, we're going to strengthen the physical safety, dedicated resources, the federal coordination of better protect Pride celebrations, marches, community centers, healthcare providers, and small businesses. Secondly, we're addressing the civil rights violations, a new coordinator to protect LGBT students from book bans, which make it harder for kids to learn and may violate their civil rights at the same time. We're also engaging in mental health and other supports, more mental health resources and funding to help families support their kids, new efforts to protect LGBTQ kids in foster care, and steps to end the absolute end of LGBTQ homelessness. Congress has to pass, and I'm not giving up on this, just like they told me we couldn't get the Marriage Act passed. Congress must pass the Equality Act and send it to my desk. LGBTQ Americans, especially children, you're loved, you're heard, and this administration has your back, and I mean it. We are not relenting one single second to make sure that they're protected.
Laura, on your question, it's clear that AI can bring incredible and will bring incredible benefits to society, our economies, to all of us. And actually, one of your leading venture capitalists just published an essay on this, which made the point very eloquently yesterday. I think it's also clear, though, that it does pose very real risks that we as leaders need to be cognizant of and put in place the guardrails to mitigate against. Actually, President Biden and I had a very good conversation on this just a couple of weeks ago in Japan in one of our sessions in Hiroshima. And we are aligned in wanting to discuss with other countries what those guardrails should be. I think here in the US, you've convened all the companies together recently. We've done the same in Downing Street just a couple of weeks ago. And I think there are a series of measures that we can implement, working cooperatively, as we have been discussing, that will ensure that we can enjoy the benefits of this technology whilst mitigating against their risks. And that's what our citizens would expect. And you talk about climate change. You know, we come together at COP to work multilaterally across multiple countries to bring down carbon emissions, to get funding to the countries that need it, to share research on how we can develop the green technologies of the future. Indeed, that's part of our conversations and agreement today. Now, we need to bring that same spirit of urgency, I think, to the challenges and opportunities that AI poses, because the pace of the technological change is faster than people had anticipated. And I think the letter that you mentioned kind of reminded us that we do need to work urgently to address this issue. And I'm delighted that Joe and I and others will be doing that with all great haste. And I think a couple of questions on our end. Could I call on the BBC?
Thank you. Chris Mason from BBC News. Prime Minister, your aim as a Conservative Party at the last general election was a full free trade deal with America. Isn't the simple truth of what's been announced today an acknowledgement of a failure to do that? And to the President, why won't you do a full trade agreement with the UK? Thank you.
Thanks. So if you look at what we've announced today, what it does is respond to the particular opportunities and challenges that we face right now and into the future. And it asks the question, what do we need to do working together that can bring most benefit to our citizens as quickly as possible? And our agreement does that. It's a first-of-a-kind agreement that's ambitious in what it seeks to achieve. I think that I've structured it around a couple of different areas. The first is economic security, because the challenges we face are much more economic in nature, big subject of our discussions at the G7 recently, and the only way we're going to meet those challenges is to work together, to strengthen the resilience of our supply chains, to research the technologies of the future together, and that's what we've announced today, is a partnership that will deepen our cooperation to strengthen the economic security, and that's good for all our citizens at home. And those risks have intensified in the past couple of years. I think that's very evident. But it also seeks to build prosperity and create jobs in both of our countries. We've announced billions of pounds of investment into the UK, which is going to support thousands of jobs. And the agreement that we've struck today will continue to do that. It will support tens of thousands of small businesses in the UK, removing unnecessary red tape so that they can trade and do business in the US far easier. And I think those types of specific targeted measures that will deliver real benefits to people as quickly as possible are the right things for us to be focused on. But I think be in no doubt, as Joe and I were discussing earlier, the economic relationship between our two countries has never been stronger. The trade is worth hundreds of billions of pounds or dollars a year. Over 1 million of our citizens in each other's countries work in each other's companies. We're one of the largest investors in each other's countries, and that trade is growing at something like 20% last year. So the relationship is strong, it's booming, but our agreement today focuses on the particular challenges, opportunities of the moment we're in, and I think that's the right thing for us both to be focused on.
I think we had a really good discussion today about our economic relationship, and we've launched negotiations on critical materials and an agreement to deal with climate crisis. For example, there is no reason why Great Britain will not play a major role in not only critical materials, but in investing in the United States of America in all of our initiatives relating to the need for critical materials, including battery technology and a whole range of things, number one. Number two, cooperating on data and AI. It is a limitless capacity and possibility. But we have to do it with great care, not relative to one another, but relative to the issue. Because when I convened the leaders in AI, about I think there were 13 here in the United States, the very architects of this AI, they're also very concerned about it getting out of hand. And we got to make sure we're all on the same page. And we're looking to Great Britain to lead that effort this fall in putting together a proposal, a group of nations to deal with, how do we deal with this? It not only has the potential to cure cancer and many other things that are just beyond our comprehension, but it has the potential to do great damage if it's not controlled. And so we're looking for, I'll overstate it, we're looking for watermarks on everything that has to do with produced by AI, so we know from whence it comes. But there's a lot we have to do. We're also addressing the national security risk posed by certain types of outbound investments. I had a discussion with Xi Jinping in China. Why was I not transferring certain technological capabilities? And I said very simply, because you're using them for weapons of mass destruction and intelligence intervention. And I said if we could work out something on that, we'd have a very different relationship. So what we're trying to do is figure out how together we can make sure that we have the, let me back up and say it this way. I don't think ever in the history of human endeavor has there been as fundamental potential technological change as is presented by artificial intelligence. It is staggering. It is staggering. You have some of these leaders in the industry talking about how they're concerned whether a machine will be able to begin to think for itself, not need to be programmed. I mean, it's just, I know it sounds like science fiction, but it is close to science fiction, some of the things. It has enormous potential. And we're looking to Great Britain to help lead that effort to figure out a way through this. So we're in full, total cooperation. Because there's no country we have greater faith in being able to negotiate this, not negotiate with individuals, negotiate our way through this, than the Prime Minister. And so we're in lockstep.
Last question.
Thank you. Last question is the Times.
Thank you. Chris Smythe from the Times. Prime Minister, you've made clear your support for free trade, but is today's agreement essentially a recognition that in light of COVID, the growing threat of China and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that the era of unfettered globalization is over? And if so, the US has made clear that it thinks that requires a much more interventionist industrial policy to respond to that. Why do you think that approach is wrong for the UK? And Mr. President, what do you say to those abroad who say that your new Washington consensus is simply a fancier way of saying America first? And in light of the warm words just now about UK-US defence collaboration, particularly in Ukraine, do you think it's time for the first British NATO Secretary-General in 2 decades?
What's the last part of your question? I'm sorry?
Is it time for a British NATO Secretary-General?
Maybe. That remains to be seen. We're going to have to get a consensus within NATO to see that happen. They have a candidate who's a very qualified individual, but we're going to have we have a lot of discussion, not between us, but in NATO, to determine what the outcome of that will be. And with regard to the first part of your question you wanted me to respond to?
It was about, is the new Washington consensus that you and your National Security Advisor set out simply another way of saying America first, which some overseas think it is?
Well, look, my economic policy is totally consistent with what I think is in the interest of our NATO allies and our allies around the world. One of the things that I decided to do, and I find that the Wall Street Journal, and I'm sure there's someone here from the Wall Street Journal and other publications that are talking about Bidenomics. I didn't realize it was, I had Bidenomics going, but the bottom line was this, that the fundamental change is taking place in terms of international trade. Nobody in, at least very few people in the United States, and I suspect around the world, knew what a supply chain meant, what they were talking about, a supply chain. When we found out during the pandemic that the reason why we couldn't build automobiles was because the outfit that we got our semiconductors from in Southeast Asia had shut down because of the pandemic, we realized that I decided that no longer would we rely on one center of support for any of the things that are needed for our economic growth. And I made it clear to all our NATO allies and our partners as well that although we were going to generate for example, an AI capacity here, a semiconductor capacity here in the United States, attracting literally several $100 billion in investment, that was available to all of our allies, all of our friends, and they're investing as we are, and benefiting in a similar way. The bottom line here for me is that I think that the world is changing in a way that globalization is still real, but the measure of what we used to call in the United States trickle-down economics, where if the trickle-down economics resulted in both in Democratic and Republican administrations for generations, in making sure we found the cheapest labor in the world, sent the product to, the work to that neighbor or those neighbors who have the cheapest labor, and they send back their products. Well, I'm not doing that anymore. We're going to make sure that we, in fact, have a flip of that. We're sending capacity here in the United States. We're attracting capacity to build here in the United States and send product overseas, not the reverse. And I know it sounds simplistic, but it's working so far. And it's not going to hurt any of our allies or friends in terms of the trade piece of this. Matter of fact, I'm finding they're benefiting from it as well because they're engaging in it with us. And at home, they're doing similar things. So that's why we talked about the need to have relationships in terms of certain materials, the battery technologies, the share. We rely on Great Britain to produce a lot of that for us. So it is increasing trade, but right now it looks like it is because the United States is doing so incredibly well. It makes it look like it's only the United States. It's not. It's a change in direction in terms of how we view generating economic growth.
And just to add to that, I'd say I'm absolutely of the view that the United States, this president, does not believe in zero-sum competition amongst allies. That's what we declared together with our G7 partners just a few weeks ago in Hiroshima. This is a president and an administration that is completely attuned to the needs and concerns of its allies on these issues, and you can see that. Today, as the president said, we are launching negotiations between the UK and the US on a critical minerals agreement so that the US can provide us with that interaction and cooperation we need. And the Atlantic Declaration that we've announced today just talks about strengthening, deepening our cooperation. It's not about looking in and being protection, it's about the exact opposite of that. And it's about strengthening that cooperation across the full spectrum of economic, technological, and other spheres. And that's what you will see. You'll see that from the president, you'll see it from me, you'll see the UK and the US working even more closely together on all the big economic issues of our time, because that's what the moment demands, and that's what our citizens need us to do, and that's what the president and I plan to deliver.
It's not just our citizens. Look, the global south, there are going to be 1 billion people in Africa very shortly. 1 billion. At the G7, it was originally called Build Back Better World, but we're talking about there's a new PPI, anyway, an industrial policy that we're all signed on to provide the countries in Africa and in the global south an opportunity to grow, significantly grow, which benefits the United States, benefits Europe, benefits every country, because the reverse is true. If we don't figure a way in which these countries can grow and participate and be able to build infrastructure. You know, the Chinese have a Belt and Road Initiative. Well, the Belt and Road Initiative turns out to be a debt and confiscation program, not going very far. But what we're doing, and we're going to be doing it with our NATO allies, with the G7, is providing opportunities. For example, Angola should be in a position very soon to have the largest solar facility in the world, generating significant amounts of energy. Benefits us, benefits them, brings them into the 21st century in a way that they've never been before. We're talking about building, and I have my team putting together with other countries as well, to build a railroad from the Pacific Ocean, from the Atlantic Ocean, all the way to the Indian Ocean. Never occurred before. How our departments of agriculture are working with these countries. So there's a significant amount of cooperation, not to hoard capacity, but to expand capacity, to further expand opportunity, because we all benefit from it. And one thing I've learned is that we are not going to be able to deal with the global warming, which is the most consequential threat to humanity, if we don't do it, unless we engage more together, not fewer, not less together. And so the United States will do what it can do well and invite all of our partners to be part of it if we can. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please remain in your seats as the principals and official delegations depart the East Room.
I'm supposed to walk off the stage now. But wait.
The bribery allegation, Congresswoman Nancy Mace says there's damning evidence in that FBI file that you sold out the country. Do you have a response to the congressional Republicans?
Where's the money? I'm joking.
Mr. President,
It's a bunch of malarkey.
Mr. President, what do you say to Americans to convince them that they should trust the independence and fairness of the Justice Department when your predecessor, Donald Trump, repeatedly attacks it?
Because you notice, I have never once, not one single time, suggest to the Justice Department what they should do or not do relative to bringing a charge or not bringing a charge. I'm honest.
中国正在改写海洋法，试图实现什么目标？亚洲正处于一个决定性时刻，未来看起来光明。普京的等待游戏，美国的核规则仍然允许另一个广岛。华尔街评论：中国正在改写海洋法，试图实现什么目标？外交政策：中国认为自己超越了法律，对其他国家，尤其是小国负责。一本探索中国海洋领域的新书的作者艾萨克·毕·卡尔登 （Isaac B. Cardin） 说。中国挑战联合国海洋法公约，该公约为各国提供了领海资源区，并允许通过海峡自由流动。根据卡登的说法，北京忽视了这些因素，并且正在从根本上改变围绕规则的国际环境，这样做的后果可能会超出其附近水域。卡登认为，在南海和东海，中国都降低了现有国际法的重要性，而不是改变它们。只有美国公开反对北京对外国船只的海上航行权利和保障的限制。然而，卡登发现，东南亚地区对支援这一国际法领域的兴趣不大，汶莱等一些国家支持中国的法律偏好。作者认为，中国加入国际机构使其能够发挥主导作用，并在道义上证明其破坏法律的实质性条款是正当的。卡登认为，我们可能会将原始能源的回归视为有关海洋的指导原则。最终，权利而不是法律可能会主导该地区，因为较小的地区国家没有任何补救措施。多年来，学者和政策制定者一直对一个问题感到困惑：中国通过其在南海和东海的广泛海洋主张试图实现什么目标？一些常见的答案包括：北京可能想控制自然资源，南海是丰富的渔业和其他生物资源的来源，并且其中包含商业可行的碳氢化合物沉积物；或者中国领导人可能寻求安全。毕竟，北京在西沙群岛的永兴岛和他占领的南沙群岛的7个岛屿上建造了军事基地。中国领导人还可能希望通过制定海洋议程并制定争端解决的规则来增强北京在更大区域秩序中的地位。然而，无论是资源利益、安全还是地位，单独都无法提供令人满意的解释。正如中国分析师艾萨克·毕·卡尔登在他的开创性著作《中国海洋法：海洋秩序的新规则》中所辩论的那样，北京是自己为基本上超越法律并对他人负责不义，尤其是对较小国家。卡尔登写道，虽然中国无法完全改变海洋规范，但北京的行动可能对其附近的海域产生后果。长期以来，联合国海洋法公约在海洋法方面明确规定了大部分事项。各国在其沿海范围内拥有12海里的领海，岛屿也是如此，而岩石和前梅特指则不是。各国还拥有至少200海里的资源区，只有他们可以捕鱼、采矿和开采深海宝藏。每个国家都可以在领海以外的海域飞行、航行和作业，并自由通过海峡。问题在于，中国虽然是联合国公约的缔约国，却违反了这些要素。卡尔登系统地展示了中国如何挑战海洋法，破坏了基于地理的定义沿海区域的规则，控制属于其他国家的海洋资源，妨碍航行自由，并忽视遵守争端解决条款的承诺。卡尔登认为，在东亚，中国不是在改变规则，而是在降低其重要性。换句话说，现有的国际法在其他地区都是可以接受的，但在这个地区，中国说了算。例如，中国通过阻止日本、越南和菲律宾开发石油和天然气田，除非他们接受北京的条款，来行使地区性的否决管辖权在海洋资源区。卡尔登写道，当涉及不需要的诉讼时，中国主张大国例外并强化主权规范，以借口规避菲律宾提起的南海仲裁。中国的海洋政策已经为其他国家打破规则开了个先例，邀请了一个国际法在海上几乎没有相关性的世界。中国正在改变这些规则生效的国际环境，卡尔登写道。然而，中国是独特的，它以强大的海军、执法机构和海上民兵舰队支持其海洋主张。这将如何影响权力较小的国家？他们现在会决定提出广泛的历史性权利主张吗？联合国公约的各方是否可以无视公约要求的仲裁？其他国家是否会决定排挤邻国享受其资源权利？正如卡尔登清楚指出的，他所分析的东亚狭窄半封闭海域周围的8个国家对这些问题有不同的回答。像中国一样，他们重视沿海水域的经济价值，他们也关心自身主权和安全。 这也许是为什么他们更支持联合国公约的规定，而不是更强大的邻国。但面对中国的强硬压迫，卡尔登写道，诉诸法律的保护力量微乎其微。至少在该地区，一些国家愿意效法中国，无视规则。例如，卡尔登写道，一些地区国家声称从不应归属于他们的岛屿和岩石获得完整的专属经济区。这可以在日本对孤立的偏远岛屿冲之鸟岛的做法中看出，也可以在越南极为过度的基线从一个国家海岸沿线划定的边界线，用于测量领海和资源区中看到。这些情况都反映了中国同样过度的主张，这些都是中国行为带来的法律侵蚀的迹象。与此同时，只有美国公然且积极反对中国对外国船只的航行权利和自由的限制。卡尔登在东南亚找不到支持这一领域国际法的意愿。一些国家，如汶莱，完全接受中国的法律偏好，其他国家则采取中立立场。美国的亲密盟友日本是唯一一个对中国试图限制军事演习和情报收集，这两者在专属经济区内是明确允许的活动提出全面意义的地区国家。尽管如此，东南亚国家在某些对中国的荒诞主张上已经形成统一反对力量。中国所谓的九段线和相关的历史权利主张几乎涵盖了南海的全部，剥夺了越南、马来西亚、印度尼西亚和菲律宾获取国际法分配给他们的海洋资源的权利。除汶莱外，中国的邻国普遍反对九段线，也许是因为他们除了法律之外没有其他保护自身利益的手段。越南、印度尼西亚和菲律宾也全力支持联合国公约的强制争端解决程序。问题是，联合国公约的这些程序的效力是有限的。卡尔登的分析提示了一个复杂且充满挑战的现实：中国的海洋政策正在重新塑造区域秩序和国际法的应用。他所主张的权利超出了国际法的范围，并且正影响住周边国家的利益和安全。这引发了对于其他国家应如何应对中国行动的关键问题，以及如何维护国际法和保护自身利益的挑战。请大家继续收看《华尔街评论》。亚洲正处于一个决定性时刻，未来看起来光明。日经亚洲评论版 Shopify 总裁 Harley Finkelstein 写道，亚洲正处于一个决定性时刻。经过多年的经济动荡，未来看起来光明。许多预测认为，亚洲将成为2023年世界上经济最具活力的地区，各国将利用自身竞争优势。随着世界日益互联，亚洲的创业精神已成为国家增长的推动力。根据 Shopify 创业指数，在衡量40个国家企业家对就业创造、出口和国内生产总值的贡献的指标中，澳大利亚、日本、中国和香港在企业家的商业活动影响方面排名前10。今年，国际货币基金组织预测亚洲将贡献全球增长的70%以上。分析师预测该地区的电子商务销售额将超过美国和欧洲，总额将超过2万亿美元。然而，并非所有情况都是积极的。对出口战略和数字基础设施的投资不足，以及对创业精神持消极态度，正在阻碍一些重要国家的发展。跨境连接、购买、销售、合作和共享的能力是使亚洲成为一个令人难以置信的增长引擎的关键所在。要推动创业，亚洲需要进一步振兴其出口。像印度和印度尼西亚这样的经济强国，以及以出口为重点的经济体，如中国、越南和韩国，都看到了跨境贸易的下滑。这些国家拥有庞大、年轻且精通数字技术的人口，但尚未充分发挥其创业潜力。印度制造等倡议正在显示出希望的迹象。最近新德里的出口额达到了4000亿美元的里程碑。尽管其中很大一部分是为外国公司生产，但印度企业家正在寻找方法将自己的品牌推向海外。通过扩大在线业务，巴拉萨尔达将印度的 Vodam 茶叶公司打造成了该国最大的全球保健品牌之一。现在，该公司向全球130多个国家的400万名客户发货。促进这种创业至关重要，以巩固亚洲在全球舞台上的地位。其次，亚洲需要在数字基础设施上投资，特别是在农村地区，以推动基于数字的经济转型。亚洲地区近40%的人口缺乏连接性，偏远地区不应意味着无法联系。根据 Shopify 的研究，印度和越南有一半的企业家以及超过80%的印度尼西亚电子商务企业家在主要城市以外开展业务。虽然进展正在取得，但印尼正在推动各种公司合作伙伴融资模式，以增强其全球经济地位。数字连接促进了教育、医疗保健和电子商务，这些都可以在推动分散人口的发展中发挥重要作用。 为了促进这种发展，我们必须共同努力，以共同的精神改变亚洲对创业的看法。研究人员经常将文化视为促进创业的最具影响力因素，因为它对创新和冒险的核心价值观具有影响力。通过政府对年轻人和女性企业家的创业培训计划的投资，取得了一些进展。然而，这项任务不能完全交给政府或公司，而应该在有机的方式下实现。随着社区接触到不同的影响和观点，各国必须鼓励新一代人接受创业的概念。的确，一个新的创业景观正在形成。在东亚和澳大利亚，一个不断扩大的中产阶级和年轻的精通技术的人口享有更好的资本、人才、教育和创新资源。由于其亲商政策、关注跨境机会以及对企业家的支持，日本正崭露头角。日本的创业精神正在展现出令人瞩目的增长。Shopify 的指数显示，他们对出口的影响在2022年增长了 29%， 对商业活动和就业的影响分别增长了 24%， 对国内生产总值的影响增长了 23%。亲商议程正在推动日本以外的经济增长。在最新预算中，澳大利亚政府提出了针对小企业的新税收激励措施，这将增加对初创企业拨款和创业计划的持续投资对该国经济的影响。企业家面临着在复杂的法规和文书工作中导航的挑战，政府可以通过简化和简化创业的过程来减轻这种负担。新加坡被认为是开展业务的最佳地点之一，它以其在线商务注册系统为例，采取了友好的创业政策，使企业家可以在几个小时内注册一家公司。请大家继续收看《华尔街评论》。普京的等待游戏，美国企业研究所。随着乌克兰南部展开期待已久的反攻，普京和他的将领们既没有足够的技巧和资源，也没有充足的人力和军队士气，只能采取防守姿态。克里姆林宫希望在即将到来的进攻中避免溃败，然后再经历一次，或许还有一次，直到西方出现乌克兰疲劳，华盛顿和布鲁塞尔将基辅推向解决方案。与乌克兰联盟的反克里姆林宫战斗人员的跨境袭击，在军事和政治上使这种等待游戏变得复杂。通过迫使莫斯科派遣军队和武器来保卫与乌克兰长达1200英里的边境，这些入侵迫使普京面临一个痛苦的困境，这是他到目前为止所避免的，在乌克兰的军队人力已经不足的情况下分散部署，或者宣布全面动员，这肯定会非常不受欢迎。这些袭击的更大政治目的是挑战普京迄今为止成功边缘化战争的策略。士兵主要从较贫困的俄罗斯省份和北高加索地区以及西伯利亚征兵，而中俄和尤其是莫斯科和圣彼得堡几乎未受影响。乌克兰将战争带到俄罗斯境内，包括无人机飞越莫斯科以及对边境地区的武装袭击，从而使战争变得不再边缘化，同时侵蚀了普京的主要合法性依据。该依据是建立在努力栽培的形象之上，他被塑造成无敌保护者母国的形象，即俄罗斯的守护圣人乔治骑马刺穿着 NATO 龙的腹部。然而，与圣乔治不同，普京不能依赖更高的力量永远让他安然无恙。耗尽战争，如果这就是这场竞争演变成的，并不在战场上赢或输，而是在政治领导人的办公室中。两方都能玩等待的游戏。如果西方不退缩，那么俄罗斯公众将在多久之后变得不仅仅是冷漠，而是变得焦虑和愤怒。那些像瓦格纳私人军事公司的指挥官和所有者叶夫根尼、普里戈金迄今尚未批评最高统帅而对国防部长和参谋长发表不可打印的言论的民粹主义战争赢家，是否会把他下流的电报爆发对准克里姆林宫？普京将如何试图摆脱这场输掉的游戏，任何人都无法预测。最坏的结果将是核武器的勒索。西方应该做好应对的准备。更多资讯，请参阅被占领的马里诺波尔，恐惧和猜疑占据住那里 Occupy Mariupol, Where Dread and Suspicion Reign。普京政权正在堕入斯大林主义 Putin's regime is descending into Stalinism。普京堕入斯大林主义 Putin's descend into Stalinism。为乌克兰的寡头们喝彩 Two cheers for Ukraine's oligarchs。本文摘自美国企业研究所 AEI 的普京的等待游戏 Putin's Waiting Game。请大家继续收看《华尔街评论》。美国的核规则仍然允许另一个广岛。外交政策，美国总统拜登最近访问广岛，此前前总统巴拉克·奥巴马 Barack Obama 在任期的最后一年进行了类似的访问，这重新引发了关于广岛和长期悲剧缺乏道德觉醒的讨论。奥巴马的访问包括一次演讲，他在演讲中没有表示遗憾或道歉， 而是期待未来爆炸事件将被视为我们自己道德觉醒的开始。相比之下，拜登最近的访问使他对爆炸事件只字未提，也没有会见炸弹幸存者。与美国的其他暴行不同，该国努力弥补过去的暴力和种族主义行为，这些行为可以追溯到社会的基础，例如调查对美洲原住民的种族清洗，或为第二次世界大战期间拘留日裔美国人道歉。没有类似的行动来弥补广岛和长崎的毁灭。美国从未承认对爆炸事件负责，而是在提及爆炸事件时采用被动语言，使美国人能够将爆炸事件视为发生在城市的事情，而不是美国政府行动的结果。然而，在核武器问题上的道德觉醒不仅需要面对造成无数日本平民死亡的爆炸事件的事实，还需要面对今天在美国核武器政策中继续引起共鸣的政策和原则。据估计，有21万平民死于爆炸，还有数千人在袭击后的几十年里遭受伤害、创伤、社会耻辱、流产率上升、出生缺陷、白血病和实体癌。谢谢大家收看华尔街电视评论。